I'm Gerald Shadle. I'm a professor at the Salk Institute in the Molecular Cell and Biology lab. I am also the Audrey Geisel Chair of Basic Science.
Einar de la Torre. I collaborate with my brother Jamix. We have our studio is in the Valle de Guadalupe in Baja California, and we also have a studio here in San Diego proper. So when we first met, I went to the Salk, and we had a brief, but it was just more informative and maybe somewhat formal. And I think we both felt like we had more to go over, more to talk about in terms of interest. So we got together and had it over some whiskey, and I think that's when we really had a lot more melding of ideas and possibilities. And I think that after all, creativity that happens in both fields or in many fields, it's about analogies to explain how things work. And when you do that, you are somehow deciphering something so that somebody else can take it in. And I think that there's a lot of commonality in that.
For a collaboration to work, there also has to be just a natural connection. And I think, that first meeting was a little strained, and not strained, but it was formal, as you said. And so it was really Einar's idea. Hey, why don't we meet? Do you like bourbon? And he says, why don't we meet up and have a more casual conversation about what you're doing, and so I can understand more. And we just really hit it off right away. And so we immediately relaxed, and we, I don't know, we probably talked for a couple hours that night, and that was really the main nucleus for the whole idea and collaboration. It was really fun.
And we thought, let's do this again, and we were going to, and then COVID came.
And then COVID hit.
So we shall. Where did the Miss Mito come from? I think that a couple of things. I think that Jerry had talked about aging and how our and the decomposition, and how maybe this very wonderful thing that we all know and love as the mitochondria turns into a negative when it's released into the bloodstream, and could potentially be a large part of aging process, if I remember right, to paraphrase. And my brother came up with the idea of since there's a flip between two images, of having the younger version and an older version. And for the younger version, we went to a quinceañera, because we thought quinceañera has this, potential. It's like basically a debutante or a coming of age moment of everything's going great, and fertility, everything is at optimum. And we thought, well, we have to switch that into what happens with aging process.
Yeah, I think the piece really captures this, unleashing of randomness and damage that happens with age. Through the lenticular was actually a perfect type of art to do it, to go from young to old and show that. But I think the other thing you maybe even accidentally captured is, if you look at the piece, you can see things coming out of the mitochondria. You can see what looks like gas coming out, or you can see things being released, and that's real. Mitochondria release different molecules that cause a cell to die or cause a cell to induce a stress response, and so they really are signaling in this really real biological way, and that's captured in the image. And of course, the aging part, mitochondria do get damaged with age, and they are thought to be major drivers of aging and age-related diseases. And so, I think all of that got captured in both it being the young and old. But if you look at the rest of the piece, it captures some other biology of mitochondria. I think you accidentally caught it, which is really interesting.
And a little bit of them turning into little devils.
Yeah, I like the demons that are attacking, because the other thing about mitochondria is they're quite susceptible to pathogens like viruses and bacteria, and they're also quite susceptible to other environmental toxins and things. So I kind of envisioned that as being another, you were kind of capturing them sort of being in this war zone, battling viruses, battling environment, and then deteriorating with age on top of that. And so it's sort of this vicious cycle of aging.
Did not age well.
Yeah, did not age well. Yeah, I think it was one interesting moment when we first, when we had our second meeting to really talk about what the science was, and I was trying to explain how mitochondria can release things, and that has other effects in the cells and stuff. And you were trying to grasp it, and finally you came up with this analogy. I think it was a subway train? I think a subway train stopping, and then all of a sudden a bunch of bad villains or whatever jumped out and go cause havoc everywhere. And actually, I think if you look at the actual drawing, not drawing, the lenticular that you created,
There's a little bit of that.
there's a little bit of that chaos.
That release.
Not a little bit, a lot of chaos.
Yeah, that reminded me a little bit of like New York in the 70s, where you're like, don't go into the subway.
So that's aging.
Yeah, well, I mean, our cells get thin-walled, I guess, right?
But even in our own, within science, I think whenever you are at the edge of disciplines, when a molecular biologist is talking to an immunologist or to a structural biologist, you bring different perspectives, and it's really at these edges of disciplines where I think magical things happen. And I think art and science have many things in common, the way people think about what they're doing and the creativity aspect.
The need for creativity, definitely.
But to cross-pollinate, I think, was really fun and really beneficial.
Yeah, I concur. I think that for me, it can't help but broaden my possibility of considerations, because then I have different imagery in my head, and that is something that I might have not done otherwise, and that is priceless. I work with my brother Jamix, and we always get asked how we collaborate, because a lot of people don't see themselves working with their brother or other sibling. I think we learned early on in college that we had complementary skills. So I think that we realized that there was more in the additive process. The outcome was better than when we were doing work alone, and that really shaped the way that our career became as a sort of a duo. So a lot of people know us for blowing glass. We still do blow glass, and that's been a big part of our career, but we also started to get into lenticular and also public art applications, and lenticular is what we made for this particular project. For us, I think my brother and I always had such a deep love for the sciences that we both even considered being textbook illustrators as a possibility for a way to have income when we were in junior high school and high school. So I think that for us, science was and still is just, we consume what we get, and of course what we can wrap our head around in layman's terms. So for us, and knowing what the mitochondria from high school, like you said very, very succinctly, I think was totally true. We're like, well, we know a little bit, so we thought this is terrific stuff.
I think it'd be great if you would do a textbook, have some of these lenticular drawings in the textbook to actually illustrate how things can change dynamically. That would be terrific. Yeah, I think similar to what Einar just said, I was interested in art when I was really young, and fancied myself as a pretty good artist, draw. I like to draw, mostly black and white pen and ink stuff, when I was in high school. But obviously had much interest in science. So to me, it was like a chance to sort of go back and revisit that interest in art with a real artist who really knows what he's doing. So that was really a lot of the reason I was interested. And I also think it's really, anytime you can get insight from somebody who thinks about the world differently than you, I think positive things can happen from that, and I think that's.
I would agree with that thoroughly. I think that we get stuck in our own worlds, and art openings very often are, friends and the same people are going. So I think broadening that is good for absolutely everybody, definitely. One of the reasons I collaborate with my brother is that he brings something different to the table. If it was just like me, we'd probably fight, and we're different enough to get along, I think is a good way to put it. So in that same vein, I think that opening yourself up to a collaborator in artwork is basically having trust in the possibility of something else happening, and so we bring that when we collaborate in cases like this. So I think we're kind of old hats at the idea of opening up and allowing new, but that's from our take.
Yeah, I think it's probably similarly, I didn't have any apprehension at all. I was very excited about the project and the collaboration, but I think many scientists, and myself included, can be a little bit rigid about and precise about what it is they're talking about and how you think about what you're discovering. And there is a little bit of a risk of getting misrepresented, maybe not exactly like reality. And so you have to let that go a little bit. But once you see the piece, and you can. And it took me a while. Actually, when I first saw it, I was like, I'm not sure this really exactly captures what we talked about. But then as you looked at it and studied it more, and then actually at the actual exhibit, when we got to talk and see it in person, I could see all the ways that it was pertinent to the research and really the biology. It really captured the thing I'm passionate about mitochondria. Is everybody knows the powerhouse of the cell part, and that's what they do, but they do so much more, and they're so important for so many other reasons that's when I got really excited about the piece, because it really captures that. And of course, the other thing I'm most passionate about these days is studying the aging process. And of course, this piece captures the aging aspect perfectly. So it's really nice.
I believe that more of this type of thing needs to happen because, again, living in our own worlds, we tend to get affirmation from colleagues, and it's a very different animal than getting somebody who doesn't come from the same worlds, as it were. And I think that also it has different ways of communicating are always good for everybody, because we need to let people know what we're doing. It's not just as an artist, I don't just make work and think, let people decipher it. I do love to hear what people have to say, but I need to other worlds to delve into so that I don't always stay in my own. So it's a much better process, and I look forward to more of that happening.
Yeah, I think I can't overestimate just how important it is that scientists do this. You need to understand that for us to run our labs, we're constantly looking for funding. We're constantly writing grant applications to the federal government, to other agencies, to get money for our own salaries, for the salaries of the technicians and postdocs and graduate students and other people in our labs. So it's a constant, it takes a lot of our time to apply for money and to keep the labs going. So an endowed share is money that basically is like a nest egg, if you will. It's money that I can use. I don't have to apply for it. I can use it to take risks and do things that I don't have to wait for a grant to come in order to do a project I'm really passionate about. I wanted to ask you, I think a lot of scientists kind of know early on, when they're kids even, junior high, maybe even earlier sometimes, that you're sort of attracted to science, and is that true for you and artists, or do you think you become exposed to things and got sort of directed into being an artist?
For us it was like that very much, but I think the art world has a lot of people that left their jobs and started to do it in their 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s. So it's not, obviously you can't do that and be a scientist and start, late in the game, because there's a lot of basic stuff you have to go through, and it's much harder to start late in the game. But we were definitely. I think I was in high school when all of a sudden my brother had already gone off to art school in Long Beach State University, and I thought one day, and I really loved science. I considered it, as a matter of fact. But it became clear that was where, the interest and my aspiration and always doodling on the edges of papers, always doing that kind of daydreaming visually with drawing, and I think that's a big part of it. And the one question I would have that follow up is, since all of that has happened, what is the latest thing that maybe you haven't talked to us about so far that has come up in the last couple of years?
With my own research, you mean? Actually, we're getting ready to write up a study now where changes in mitochondrial metabolism actually lead to a better immune response against cancer. And so it may be, and this is a collaboration with my wife Susan Keck at Salk. We have a grant together and been studying this for the last couple of years, and we're just really excited that there may be an avenue here where we can modulate mitochondrial function as a way to make your immune system attack cancer more readily and to make what's called immunotherapy work better. So that's, I think, the really coolest thing at the moment.
And it's in-house. And your wife, of course, is part of this exhibition as well.
Yes, she had a really cool exhibition with lymph nodes and memories inside. It's really neat.
Right next to us.
You know, this is probably one of the most important things that scientists can do, is to try to better communicate science to the public. And I think any venue that can allow us to do that better, I mean, scientists tend to be, keep to themselves, they're in the lab, they're trying to, you know, just push the science forward and learn new things, but we really need to be communicating more with the public, and so they understand just how important what we're doing is. You know, the reason we live as long as we do now is because of science and technology. You know, medicines, vaccines, all the advances, your ability to communicate with each other on a cell phone, which is basically a more powerful computer than we used to have back in the 50s. I think any venue like this where we can bridge that gap is perfect.